Good? Yeah? Okay. All right, guys. Well, I think we'll just go ahead and get started. Maybe I will, if there is anybody who comes in late, there are more handouts here. So, good afternoon, everyone. I am Magee. I am a registered dietetic tech, a certified mind-body eating coach. My practice is Nourish Nutrition Consulting. I physically live in Thornton, but my practice is virtual, so I am all over Colorado, and then I have clients that I work with all over the U.S. I think my furthest client is Hawaii. I need to go visit her, for sure. So, when I think of the work that I do, I really focus on bridging the gap between a health change or a health diagnosis. In mainstream world, if we do have a health change or a health diagnosis, the conversation so often is just medical management, medicine management. And many times that's maybe what we need, but I also believe there's so much more we can do to truly bridge that gap and get our bodies functioning as optimal as possible, and potentially not use medications. Most of my clients come to see me, again, like I'm mentioning, when there truly is a health diagnosis or a health change. So most of my clients have autoimmune conditions. Many of my clients have 2 autoimmune conditions, and my clients don't feel good. And I love to get to be a part of that journey of looking at how do we support the body in healing through food, lifestyle changes, stress management. And today, we are going to be talking about stress management and resilience through nutrition. I think in our world in this day and age in 2024, we downplay the impact of stress on the body. I think there's almost a level of, how do I want to even say it, but kind of, oh, you're just stressed out? Yeah, me too. So there's like some normalcy to it. Oh, we're just all overly stressed. We're all burning it at both ends. And we talk about it from the lens of, oh, that's just normal. And I also think there's some energy between needing to check everything off the box in the day. Oh, I have 20 things on my to-do list today. I've got to get all 20 done in order to feel successful in my day or in my life. And it's that overdoing, it's that high level of stress that directly impacts how we feel, our body function, and ultimately our health. And that's really the guts of what we're going to talk about today, is how much that chronic stress directly impacts us. I don't think stress is something to downplay. Oh, you're just stressed out. That's normal. That's okay. No, I think we really need to consider, is our expectations of how we show up day in and day out working for us in a way that we're thriving in our lives? So let's jump in a little bit more. I'm going to start off by giving you the example of Sally. Sally gets up at 5 in the morning. She gets herself showered and dressed. She gets her kids up, gets them dressed, breakfast ready and on the table, lunch is made. She's sipping on a coffee while she's doing all of these things. She's rushing around to get the kids in the car. And as she goes to get in the car, she spills the coffee down her shirt, has to run back in, change her clothes, gets back in the car, gets the kids off to school. Sally goes off to work. She's in meetings all morning, go, 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 go. And the first time she comes up for air is 12:30. Now remember, at this point, all Sally has had is a cup of coffee, and she's been running all morning. So it's 12:30, and she's got a meeting at 1:30 across town. So while she's driving across town, she swings by the fast food place, shoves the meal down while she's driving, gets to her meetings. Then, it's 3 o'clock, she's got to go pick the kids up. Picks the kids up, gets them to soccer practice, gets them home, has to get through dinner, homework, bath time. Now it's 9:30 p.m. It's really the first time Sally is catching her breath. And now Sally's thinking, I need some chocolate. I need some ice cream. I need a glass of wine. What's going to help me de-stress after such a crazy day? Sally finally crawls back into bed at midnight and repeat, repeat, repeat. Now, our days may not all look like Sally's, but I think we can appreciate our days look like some semblance of that, running from one thing to the next, maybe always feeling 2 steps behind. And in a moment here, we're going to start talking about hormonally how that impacts our body and how that directly impacts our health and potentially our risk for disease. Think about back in the day when we were Paleolithic people, hunters and gatherers. Our stress was very different. Our stress was short duration, but potentially high intensity. Like, there goes a deer or a gazelle, and that's my dinner. If I don't catch it, I'm about to be real hungry. Or, hey, there's a bear behind me. I'm about to be lunch. I better get out of the way. Okay, so short duration, potentially high intensity. That is, on a cellular level, how our bodies are meant to function. In 2024, that is not how we function. We have dull chronic stress all day long, and then you add an acute stress on top, whatever that might be. A job change, a loss of a loved one, a divorce, whatever that looks like. Because of that intensity of stress that we all endure now, it directly impacts our hormones, especially insulin and cortisol, and we're going to focus heavily on those in just a second here. So even though we are no longer Paleolithic people, hunters and gatherers, that is still in our DNA. That's still how our bodies are meant to function, even though that's not our reality anymore, right? So we're going to start off talking about blood sugar, and on your handouts, that graph on the top, that's what I'm going to be referring to. Often when I say the word blood sugar, most people jump to the conversation around diabetes, and that's not what I'm talking about. That's another seminar. But blood sugar is such the foundation of how our bodies work. We eat food for fuel. Our pancreas then secretes insulin to convert that food over to fuel. That's the normal reaction, the normal response in all of us. The catch, if we're not eating the right balance of nutrients, and or we're not eating the right frequency, it will cause our blood sugar to be bumpy. Some of us might feel that. Some of us might not feel that. But if our blood sugar is bumping along, research proves that when the blood sugar is dropping, and again, you do not have to feel that, but when the blood sugar is dropping, we will see depression, anxiety, panic attacks, inability to cope with stress, pain, inflammation, brain fog, fatigue. Those are the most common symptoms we see when the blood sugar is not stable. Interestingly enough, those are probably some of the biggest complaints I hear on a day from my clients. Hey Megan, I really need more energy. Hey Megan, I need to figure out how to better cope with my stress. I got a lot going on. Hey Megan, it's the winter. How do I avoid seasonal depression? How do I have the energy and the ability to cope in my day? How we eat directly impacts us. When I think about, so the two main hormones that I think about when it comes to stress are insulin and cortisol. And again, speaking to the blood sugar component, if we're not eating the right balance of nutrients or in the right frequency, when we do eat, it can cause us to spike the blood sugar. That blood sugar spike causes the pancreas to secrete out more insulin. The body's always trying to keep blood sugar in a tight zone, but that insulin becomes fat storing and inflammatory. So especially if we're thinking about metabolism and our body's ability to use our food or fuel, we want to be secreting the right balance of insulin to do just that. The hormone that goes hand in hand with insulin is cortisol. Hopefully you have heard of cortisol. Often I think of it as the dirty C word. So our adrenal glands are pea-sized glands that sit right with our kidneys. They are the glands that help us to cope with our stress. The adrenal glands secrete cortisol. We need cortisol. Like all of our hormones, though, we need the right amount. Too little or too much just doesn't work in the body. And if we are secreting large amounts of cortisol to cope with stress, cortisol does a lot of things. Again, we need it, but we need the right amount. So the negative of too much cortisol, number one, it's inflammatory. Just like insulin, if secreted in the wrong way, it builds inflammation, and inflammation is the underlying component of any health change. Cortisol translates to belly fat, stores everything at the belly. Cortisol does some interesting things that we don't always hear about. Did you know that cortisol can disrupt your appetite? Interesting. So cortisol can actually cause you to have no appetite for 6 to 8 hours, and then maybe you have 4 hours you just can't stop eating. Cortisol shuts off your ability to digest. Think about it this way. I mentioned the bear back when we were Paleolithic people. If I just ate lunch and there's a bear chasing me, I don't need to digest that lunch. I need my eyes to dilate so I can see keenly and sharply. I need blood flow to my extremities so I can get out of the way. I don't need to digest that lunch. Digestion is not an essential activity. So if you struggle with any type of digestive changes, lots of clients come to see me for things like irritable bowel condition and constipation or maybe even diarrhea. If we are dumping those stress hormones, cortisol, it directly impacts our ability to digest. And if we are pushing too much cortisol, it's one of the biggest factors that we're going to push the wrong balance of insulin. So cortisol and insulin feed each other. Healthy cortisol levels could look like this. Falling asleep with ease. Sleeping deeply and soundly all night long. Waking rested. Having consistent, sustained energy all day long. Repeat, repeat, repeat. And for most of us, we have some variance of that. Oh, it takes me forever to fall asleep. Once I fall asleep, I'll sleep through the night. Oh, it doesn't matter if I sleep 6 hours or 12 hours, I wake up tired. Oh, I always crash at 2 to 3 in the afternoon. Then I rebound at 8 o'clock at night and I can't go to sleep. All of us are different, but that energy rhythm sleep, and energy is a good indicator of if perhaps our body is too stressed, if we're secreting that wrong balance of cortisol. There's a couple other pieces to know. When cortisol and insulin are out of balance, there's other impacts. So for example, if our adrenal glands are tired, we are tired. And for a lot of us, this is where we become so reliant on caffeine. So I have no problem with a cup of coffee. It's when my clients say to me, Megan, I drink a pot of coffee before I leave the house. I can't leave the house before I drink a pot of coffee. Please tell me I don't have to stop drinking a pot of coffee. Okay, then we have some work to do, and I hear that often actually. So when the adrenals are tired, we're often looking for stimulants. We're looking for sugar. We're looking for caffeine. What's gonna boost us to get us through the day? As we consume those things, they put more stress on the adrenals, which keeps the adrenals more fatigued, and now we're on a hamster wheel. Black and white, again, I have no issues with coffee. I have no issues with sugar. The dose makes the poison. So I don't think a high sugar diet is the way to go, but somebody who's like, oh, today I really want a piece of chocolate. Great, no problem with that, okay? It's when those cravings are so intense and when we feel like we are truly reliant on those things and we can't get through our days without them, that's when we know there's an issue. So cortisol and insulin are the big hormones that become dysregulated from chronic stress. And if those are not addressed, health changes ensue. That is the work I do with my clients day in and day out, is working on those health changes that result because of chronic stress. On your handout, you're going to see that I indicated some foundational strategies, and that's what we're going to start to talk about. So how do we take care of our bodies to cope with our stress, to better support our bodies so that our bodies work like the well-oiled machine they are meant to be? And the first strategy is to eat regularly. Let's talk about that. I know there's a lot of different conversations out there in the world of should we eat with more regularity and more consistency in routine? Should we fast for periods of time? There's all different conversations out there. Number one, I think bio-individuality is a really important piece. What works for your body might not be what works for the next person. But for the majority of my clients, and for the majority of the work that I do, I believe we need to be eating regularly. The definition of eating regularly is eating breakfast within the first 1 to 2 hours of being awake, and then not going more than 4 hours between. When we are going way too long between eating, again, that's what's causing our blood sugar to be bumpy. We do not have to feel that. But again, if the blood sugar is dropping, that's where all those things come about that I was sharing with you. For most of the standard American population that I work with who are doing the daily grind, we need regular eating to keep the blood sugar stable, to keep our energy stable, to keep our brains functioning, to help us be able to cope with stress. So the first strategy to support your body is to eat with some regularity. Second, well, let's talk about breakfast, because what we eat at breakfast has a direct outcome. If we start our day with a high carbohydrate or a high sugar breakfast, it actually keeps the blood sugar bumpy all day long. So I think about when I was growing up as a kid, our breakfasts were always heavy carbs and heavy sugar. It was very normal. We would have a muffin, a bagel. I grew up on the East Coast, lots of bagels. Okay. We would have a bowl of cereal and a glass of orange juice. Research proves that if we start our day with those high glycemic, low nutrient dense carbohydrates, it actually shuts our brains off, and again, it keeps us feeling bumpy all day long. It will keep us craving sugar all day long. Protein is key. Protein sets the tone to keep that blood sugar stable all day long. Now, that could be a more abundant breakfast, depends on your day, your time. Maybe you're making home-cooked eggs. If you have time to do that, great. For a lot of my clients, they need more grab and go, that doesn't always work, and that's okay. So I always think we have to match our lifestyle with some of these strategies to be able to thrive. So maybe we need something faster. Maybe we need like a protein shake. Maybe we need, actually my lunch on the way here, I've had a very full day. My lunch on the way here was big lettuce leaves stuffed with some turkey, and I did a couple of roll-ups, and that could be a breakfast. Super easy, super fast. Maybe it's even as simple as getting a big spoonful of almond butter in, and those nuts have a little bit of protein, just to get something in, even if that means that's all I can do to get the kids off to school, and then I can come back to having a more formal breakfast. Great. Starting the day with breakfast, I think, is so key to turning our brains on and giving us the energy for the day. And that protein really makes a difference. I also believe that most of us need snacks. And that might depend on your rhythm and your routine. But for example, 3 in the afternoon, 2 to 4, but we'll call it 3 in the afternoon, that's a hormone shifting time for every single human being on the planet. It is not coincidental that so many of us feel like we fatigue out and crash at 3 in the afternoon. There's a real reason. And so I think we need a snack. The type makes the difference. If we're having popcorn and pretzels and chips and the candy bowl at the office, it might give us that boost, but what goes up must come down. The idea of a snack in my mind is a fruit or a vegetable plus some protein or fat. So the carbohydrate in the fruit and the vegetable give us energy. And yes, carbohydrates are in fruits and vegetables. Pairing some protein or fat with it helps it to stick and last, so we feel fuller longer. We tend to feel more satisfied, and it keeps our blood sugar more stable. So pick what you like. An apple with almond butter, some strawberries and some walnuts. Maybe it's veggies dipped in hummus, some veggies dipped in guac, a fruit or a veggie and a hard-boiled egg. These snacks can be very available and accessible for grab and go. We might just need to get a little organized with that. But these are very easy snacks. And again, one of the biggest kind of complaints or concerns I hear from my client is just that, Megan, I need grab and go. I need to be able to keep doing life, and I don't have time to go have a gourmet snack at 3 in the afternoon. And that's okay. So let's match lifestyle with what's going to give us the fuel that our bodies actually need. The next strategy is water. I know we hear it over and over, but yes, we need to drink water. Research shows we need to drink half our body weight in ounces per day. So just for easy math, let's say somebody weighs 140 pounds, half their body weight would be 70, they need 70 ounces of water a day. Now, depending on the day, we might need more than that. If we're outside in the middle of the summer and it's hot, we live in Colorado, it's very dry here, right? So that gives us a range of where we need to be, and maybe we need a little bit more. Water is H2O. O is oxygen. That oxygen feeds your brain. So the next time it's 3 in the afternoon and you start to feel the slump, maybe go grab a glass of water. Get some oxygen in for your brain to function. Side note, one of the most classic symptoms of dehydration is cues of hunger. So if you're thinking from a weight management conversation, maybe before you go have that snack or meal, consider if you're really hungry or maybe if you're actually dehydrated. Next strategy. Let's talk about sleep. Sometimes I hear from my clients that sleep is more of a luxury. And I get it, we all have very full days. But I don't think of sleep as a luxury. I think of sleep as a necessity. Believe it or not, research shows that we still need, even as adults, 7 to 10 hours of sleep per night. Now, I know some nights might be better than others, but did you know that if you consistently get 5 hours of sleep or less per night, you're twice as likely to develop diabetes? Wow, that's powerful information that sleep alone can have such an impact, right? But I also want you to connect the dots. If you're trying to think about how do I better cope with my stress, how do I better show up day in and day out to be able to perform at the level I need to, well, gosh, doesn't it make sense that we also need sleep? How many of you have heard of the term circadian rhythm? This is relevant with the time change tomorrow, by the way. Circadian rhythms are the idea that we are meant to be up with the roosters, up with the sun. We are meant to be asleep shortly after sundown. Now, that's not theoretically how we function anymore. With technology, we can be awake at midnight and order dining room furniture on the computer and do laundry and have a snack. So technology definitely impacts us, yes. But even though we have all that technology, we still, our bodies still follow circadian rhythm, meaning we are supposed to be asleep shortly after sundown and up with the roosters. Different hormonal activity also follows that. So if someone is consistently getting 8 hours of sleep, believe it or not, there's a difference between someone who sleeps 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. and someone who sleeps midnight to 8. So both of those are 8 hours, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., midnight to 8, both are 8 hours. The person who sleeps 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. has a completely different healing experience because of circadian rhythms. Remember, we sleep to heal. That is why we sleep. We need to shut down our computers so we can reboot the next day. So I also want you to consider that if you are struggling to get sleep, if you're struggling to get adequate sleep, at least consider when you are sleeping. Those first 2 hours before midnight have a very big impact on your body's ability to heal. And so even if you're someone who only gets 5 hours of sleep a night, not very ideal, but even if you are, I think sleeping 10 p.m. to 3 a.m. is a completely different sleep experience than midnight to 5. So just consider, some of these things really have big impact on our bodies. The sixth strategy that I want to focus on is breathing. So it's funny, I talk about deep breathing a lot in my days. And every time I have this conversation, I kind of chuckle. Really, am I talking about breathing again? We're all breathing or we wouldn't be sitting here, right? Research proves that deep breathing is the #1 way to turn down cortisol and therefore insulin. So remember, we're pushing cortisol and potentially insulin because of our stress. Deep breathing is the #1 way to turn that cortisol down. So think about it. When you are stressed, your breath becomes very shallow. Maybe you even feel pressure in your chest, maybe a little bit of anxiety-like. So deep breathing has been shown. It's telling our bodies that we're safe. There isn't a bear chasing us. Deep breathing tells our nervous systems it's okay to relax. The beauty of deep breathing is it's free. You don't have to go to the gym. You don't have to go to the store to buy it. But could you bring in more deep breathing in your days? This doesn't have to be a time suck. This doesn't have to be one more to do on the list. Could you integrate it? So for example, you're driving across town, and every time you hit a red light, you take 10 deep breaths. By the way, as I talk about deep breathing, I also want to just kind of lean in. Deep breathing should be rhythmic. And everyone's going to be a little different here, but roughly 5 counts of breath in, roughly 5 counts of breath out. So it should be rhythmic. Often when we're stressed out, we might find that we can take a couple counts of breath in, but it's dysregulated. The breath out is very different. So I recognize that often after a full morning of working with clients, I might be able to take 2 or 3 counts of breath in, and I can take 10 counts of breath out. Very dysregulated. So again, how do we bring this in with more regularity? Again, I gave you the example of every time you hit a red light. What about the top of every hour? You just start to get in the routine that the top of every hour, when you catch the clock, I'm going to take 10 deep breaths. What about before you eat? Especially if you're in prayer before you eat, try to bring some attention to the breath as well. That breath work before you eat. Remember, I told you that cortisol dysregulates appetite and impacts our digestion. So practicing deep breathing before we eat can even improve that. If you're having trouble around sleep, whether it's falling asleep or staying asleep, could you practice some deep breathing? Practicing 10 to 30 minutes of breathing before bed can help you better fall asleep and better stay asleep. If you always wake up at 3 in the morning, rather than letting your brain go 1,000 miles a minute, could you practice your breathing? Maybe you put a hand on your chest, a hand on your belly. Maybe you sit with an affirmation or a meditation of some sort of focusing on I'm inhaling peace, I'm exhaling my stress. What can you do to bring in more breath work consciously to help turn down those stress hormones. In a moment here, we're going to get ready to wind down, and I'm happy to answer any questions. I want to thank you all for being a part of this conversation today. And it is really my passion to work with both my clients and the community around health, taking active steps in our health, taking active steps to manage our stress has a big impact. None of us are exempt. We all have stress. Some days are better than others. But when I look at the disease epidemic that we are in, I recognize directly how much stress is impacting us. As we move into the holiday season here, we've turned the calendar to November, so we are on the fast track. Think about, can you bring some of these strategies in to better manage the holidays? The holidays often mean more events, more social, more gatherings, more to-dos. Can we work on better eating routine, better nourishment of what we're actually eating? Can we make sure if we're going to be gone all day that we bring some healthy snacks with us? Can we make sure anytime we leave the house we have a bottle of water with us? Can we protect our sleep? Can we work to bring in some breathing? Thank you again for your time. I'm happy to answer any questions, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your afternoon on this beautiful fall day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
I mean, you talk about half your body weight in
Yes.
water.
Yeah.
I've also heard a recommendation to have half your body weight in grams of protein.
So for protein, I get a little more specific with my clients because it depends on what is happening. So if it's someone who is kind of, I'm going to say general day in and day out, that's a very different conversation than maybe somebody who has an acute health condition, right? A surgery, right? Things like that. So the way to figure out protein is you take your weight divided by 2.2, that's going to give you kilograms, and then you can multiply that by 0.8 or 1 to figure out grams. And so I kind of play with that. I think protein is a very important part of our diets. It helps to stabilize that blood sugar, which again is going to give you longevity and energy. There's a lot of different conversation around protein out there, and the thing about nutrition, it's one of the things I actually enjoy, is that every day it's a different conversation. You know, this is good, this is bad, this is good, this is bad, right? High protein, low protein, no protein, high carb, low carb, no carb, right? We hear these different conversations. I think it's about balance. I think it's about honoring what works for your body. I do think protein is a big piece of that for stabilizing. If we're not getting enough protein, we tend to be more likely to crave and more likely to overeat carbohydrates and sugars. So the protein's really important. Yeah, good question.
What do you think about OMAD diet?
OMAD diet? I'm not familiar with that.
The 1 meal a day?
Okay, yeah. So I am, in my opinion, now everybody's different, I am not a fan of 1 meal a day. From a blood sugar conversation, I think that directly will bite us at some point, and I've seen it. So last year especially, I don't know why, I had a lot of clients who were doing intermittent fasting, so they were choosing to go stretches of time without eating. They had been doing intermittent fasting for more than 2 years. They all felt terrible, and I diagnosed all of them with full-blown diabetes. So I think if someone is eating based on intermittent fasting or potentially only once a day, I think we really need to look at what's happening with blood sugar and insulin, and is that supportive? The other layer then is, how do you feel? If you eat once a day and you have energy and you have brain power and you feel good in your belly and your blood work looks great, game on.
Okay, on that.
Yeah.
And thank you for asking that question, because I was thinking about intermittent fasting while we were talking.
Yeah.
So you said that that segment of your clientele all just kind of felt bad after doing that, and were they doing like the variety of different intermittent fasting routines?
Mm-hmm.
Was it just generally one type of intermittent fasting, and how are you diagnosing?
Mm-hmm. Great.
Doing it?
Yeah, good questions. Yeah, all of the above. So for most of my clients, they were doing a 12-hour fast, if not more, 12 to 18. 12 was pretty typical. But I think there are other layers to it, and this is my interpretation based on that. I'm not black and white anti-intermittent fasting. I think we just need to know what we're doing. But I think what happens too is sometimes clients get a little fixated on one thing and they forget about other things. So as much as these clients were fasting with the intent to support their body, reduce some glucose levels, I think their foods were getting off then.
Sure.
And as a piece of that. How am I diagnosing blood?
Yeah.
Glucose, hemoglobin, A1C, and insulin.
Okay. Great.
And I run an insulin, to be clear. 99% of your medical practitioners out there don't run an insulin. I want to know if you have insulin resistance. Insulin resistance is different than diabetes as far as management. Insulin resistance is a diagnosis of stress. I see a lot of it.
Do you run any kind of cortisol testing?
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are you looking at, serum, or are you looking at
Serum.
urine?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I run a serum just to get a starting point. I do a morning serum on cortisol. And then depending on the client and what we need to look at, if we need to look at more, I might do a saliva panel to get a better sense of the bell curve of cortisol. So I like both of those. The saliva, in my opinion, gives us a better sense of what's really happening. Cortisol gives us a good starting point, though, from a serum level.
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, Megan's been working with me for a long time, and she's patient, and I mean, she diagnosed me with hypoglycemia. And I probably had since I was a kid, and I had no idea.
Well,
I mean,
you
there's
know.
so many different pieces.
Given your background, I know.
We're both great.
Yes.
It's,
That's a thing.
Yeah.
And the way that I practice nutrition, just for what it's worth, because again, I think there's so many conversations around nutrition out there. My approach, number one, I don't like to define anything good or bad or right or wrong. My favorite saying is the dose makes the poison. So it was just Halloween. Yep, I gave out candy this year, sure did. I have no problem with chocolate. The dose makes the poison. Okay, that's the first piece. From there, every client I work with, I really think about bio-individuality. What works for one person might not work for the next. And so instead of a blanket statement of this is what's right and this is the only way to think about nutrition, it's not how I practice. Because the majority of my clients have autoimmune conditions or health changes, and I do look at quite a bit of blood work, that's how I determine what we need to do. What's going on in your body? What are your symptoms? Let's put it all together. So the individualized and the customized piece, I think, is really important because I think we're all unique in that way too. Yeah. Any other questions?